I'm Brianna McHenry.
And I'm Stephanie Della Porta, and we are your guides for the When in Bloom podcast.
Join us weekly as we include tips, tricks, and alignment tools that support us on our personal journeys.
Bringing you back to the knowing that you have all that you need within you to bloom. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are tuning in today, or perhaps even tuning in months from now. We are so grateful to have you here sharing this space and co-creating this energy with us. As mentioned last week, on today's episode, we are talking about resistance and what that looks like for each of us and ways to move through it. All right, let's just jump right in. Resistance. What does that word mean to you, Brianna?
Wow. What does resistance mean to me? To me, resistance really is like my ego. It's almost like they're interchangeable. It's like resistance, it's like ego is the noun and resistance is the verb. It feels like the resistance is there, though, for your ultimate growth and expansion. And when there's resistance, like those are the best parts because you know that something really good is on the other side of it. And it's such a good reminder of like how you can just let go. What does resistance mean to you?
It's such a loaded question. That word is so loaded because it almost sounds aggressive, the word itself, resistance, Um,
Yeah.
I think the root of it for me begins with a resistance to change. And then when you break it down further, it becomes a lack of control. And then when we can't control, we become fearful, and that fear quickly turns into anger. Well, at least for me, it does. And anger is very much like a balloon. So you can kind of think of it as you get angry, you blow hot air into this balloon. And as you get angrier, the balloon begins to expand and it begins to take on a shape of its own. So if you don't stop in time, that balloon will burst from all the fury that you've blown into it. And then you have to pick up the broken pieces. And this can result in, not saying things to someone that you can never take back, ruining a relationship, ruining, I don't know, for example, a job, being employed. Basically, I think is anger is you trying to control a situation. And when it's not the desirable outcome, that emotion rises to the surface. Whereas with love, there's no control. So love doesn't try to control someone or their actions. So really, I think that at the end of it all, it just comes back to a feeling of being powerless in a situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you mentioned the fear of change, because change is terrifying. And it's so nice when you get into that comfortable spot of just predictability where like, oh, this is what I do and this is how things are. And it's so comfortable. But then but then in the back of your mind, you're like, no, this is the worst. This is the worst. We've got to do something else. But then your ego and that resistance is like, no, take it easy. This is great. This is all you're here to do.
I agree with what you said before, that I'm finding too that instead of wanting to overcome resistance, I actually need to move through it because that's where the lessons are. Asking myself, why am I resisting? Why why am I getting so frustrated and so upset with something that I can't change? And I feel especially now after 2020, this is the big theme. It's just resistance in different ways. It's showing up in so many different ways on a collective and an individual level. So I'm finding for me, especially, resistance shows up the most when it comes to the actions and beliefs of other people and the circumstances around me, like where I'm living, what I am doing in terms of financial security. I begin to create a story in my head, and then I will feel it in my body. So when I feel it in my body, it ends up showing up as anxiety or even stomach pains. And like sometimes I'm even physically holding my breath. I don't know. I don't even realize I haven't breathed in the last, minute or so. Um, so I find that for me, it starts in the mental and energetic planes, and then it manifests in the physical plane, my physical body. So that's when I realized that in order to heal my body, I actually have to heal my mind and my thoughts. So that's really coming back to that. It's that feeling, that thought, that perception of feeling powerless. And then for me, when I obsess and possess about something, I find it's most often when my creative and spiritual energy isn't getting properly channeled. So it's on days where I'm not getting into the studio, I'm not painting, I'm not meditating, um, I'm not connecting to my spiritual work. I find that that's when I start obsessing about and possessing about people, places, and things that I don't even care about. And then I start creating a story around that. And in all transparency, it's most of the time a very negative perception or story. It's not a positive one. And I think that's where the resistance comes in. I've become so attached to that emotion and that feeling and that story that I can't see, the forest. I'm just seeing the tree, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I was really thinking about how resistance shows up for me as doubt. It's definitely not something that I feel physically, but it's something that I know. Like I'm really knowing, and I just kind of know when it's coming up for me because I'm constantly doubting myself and I'm constantly doubting the manifestations that I'm trying to create. But if you think about it, when we're kids, we're taught to control everything. Like when you're like 3 or 4, people are asking you what you want to be when you grow up. And they're already putting it in your mind that you kind of that you have full control over it. But the reason why you want to be a firefighter when you grow up might be because you watch a TV show and the firefighter on the TV show is really helpful and you want to help people. So that internalizes as wanting to be a firefighter. So you kind of hold on to that your whole life instead of getting to the reason as to you want to be a firefighter because you want to help people. And maybe you don't want it to manifest as a firefighter. You want to manifest it in a different way. But you're so stuck on controlling those specific things that you had in your mind that that's what you run with. And I also think people really condition the magic out of us. Like if you think when you're kids, you can see the magic in everything, in every single moment. And it's like those coincidences that you experience, you're taught to doubt them. And you're taught that they're just coincidence and that there's no such thing as synchronicities.
I actually love everything that you said. Because the most ironic thing of all is that we actually don't have any control. And once we learn that, that's what it means to be not attached to the fact that we cannot control anything. Really, I mean, except our own thoughts. And I think because we haven't learned how to do that, because we've been trying to control, as you said, we've been conditioned and programmed to control our external environment. Most of us don't know how to control internally. And that's when, like I mentioned earlier, we start creating these stories start being created, and then we start acting out on stories that really aren't necessarily true. They're true to us, but they're not necessarily true to the situation and what is actually happening in your external environment. It's just how we're perceiving things. For me, in my natal chart, my Mars is at home in Aries. And I've learned that sometimes my energy can express itself. Well, truthfully, it can be very combative because Mars is the warrior. And there are times that warrior energy is very useful, but I've learned for myself that when it comes to resistance, I move through it um, with more ease if I replace that sword with love. Does that make sense? More like I'm not going into battle with my sword drawn and wanting to
Mm-hmm.
destroy, but I'm replacing it with love. Because the battle really isn't in the circumstances around me. It's in my mind and it's in the way that I'm
Mm-hmm.
perceiving the situation. The war is never with someone else. It's with my own belief that I'm powerless, and it once again that stems from that feeling of a lack of control, and then that's where I begin to resist what's happening.
Well, there's a lot that I was thinking about resistance just this morning. One of the things I was thinking about was us getting together to record this, because it's almost like every time we come up with a time to get together and record it, one of us is like, yeah, but are you sure? Yeah, are you okay? Well, is it okay? Do you want to wait? No? Like, do you have everything you need? But are you too tired? Like, the excuses go on and on and on. And that's just our ego showing up as like loving resistance. And it's our ego. Like, the ego's not bad. We need our ego, but it's almost like the ego cloaking itself as the soul, lovingly in your ear, like that little voice in the back of your head saying, but maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should just take a nap instead. Yeah, maybe you should just stay small.
What you were saying about how the ego cloaks itself, I I definitely do resonate with that. It's so interesting for me that how resistance is showing up differently for us. I mean, I resonate with everything you're saying and I've experienced it. I'm experiencing as well a lot of what you're saying, but for me, as I mentioned earlier, that resistance is coming up in terms of physically where I am at the moment, where I am in the world. It's coming up in things that I can't quite control since 2020 because I was a traveler and this was not my original plan to be staying in my hometown this long. But if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have met you and we wouldn't be doing this podcast and I wouldn't have had all my spiritual gifts pretty much blow up. We can say they blew up in my face, but in a good way, in the very best way.
So, how you were saying you kind of created this path for your life, which included traveling, and then it was kind of like, oh, sorry, we're going to go back here. When I was meditating this morning, I was just asking for guidance. I really didn't have any set intention. And my guides were showing me it looked like a big river. And at the end of the river was, it might sound morbid, but it was kind of like the end of your life, like the end of this incarnation. And along the big river, there were all these little channels that went out from the edges of the river. And it's like you can stay on this big river and you can go explore these channels, but you're always going to get pulled back into that river. So for you, it's like you went out on this channel and you were like, I'm going to go travel and do all these things and be in total control of everything. And then the universe was like, nope, we're coming back to the river and this is what you're here to do. And then you're going to keep going.
It's so funny you say that because I actually channeled a a message from my Akashic records about how we are all each individual rivers and that's our incarnation and then it leads into the cosmic ocean. So when you transition into the next life, so when you pass from this life, it's basically that river because each river flows into the ocean and that ocean represents the cosmos and that's your incarnation. And I actually
I
am
love
going to
it.
be releasing it on Instagram at some point because it's part of my Akashic journaling painting journal that I've been doing. And so with the recording, so that's so interesting that you said that because I finished it the other day. So I'm just laughing how it's come back around and how you got a similar message, which happens to us
Yeah.
so much, which is why me and you relate so much to each other because we're so connected on ways that I don't even think we've really understood yet.
Mm-hmm.
um Definitely our consciousness flows into one another for sure because we are connected to that source consciousness. Clearly it just came out right now. And you're absolutely right. It also goes back to literally that lack of control. That's how the resistance starts. It's just that lack that lack of control. And I always find, especially in this circumstance with me, there's a resistance to stillness. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I even find that in yoga, that's why most people skip shavasana, the corpse pose at the end, because it's that stillness, that integration time that we don't want to sit with ourselves. Even yin yoga. Some days I do yin yoga because I do yoga every day. And there's moments where I don't want to sit still. I want to move. I fidget. I try to readjust, even though I don't need to. It's just I can't be still. And I think that was also the challenge when you first start meditating, is learning how to just not like just be still because you resist it. And that resistance is movement. By moving, you're resisting that stillness. So I think that, like I said at the beginning, that word is so loaded. It's such a loaded word that it encompasses so much. I mean, it can encompass individually in these examples both of us have just given, as well as collectively in the form of, movements, feminine movements, Black Lives Matters movements, political movements. It's all, it just shows up in so many ways. And I think it comes back to resistance ends up being the physical act of what you're feeling internally or what you're thinking.
Hmm. Like here it is. I thought yeah, we're just going to talk about resistance. And here are the ways that it's showing up for us. And it's like so deep. And every time I'm listening to you talk, like more and more and more is coming up. And
Same
yeah,
for me.
I always thought it was just like, oh yeah, it's just resistance. We just got to push through it. We just got to go. Nope. That's not it. I also struggle with sitting still. I will sit still for like 3 or 4 minutes and be like, okay, that was great. I did it. Bye. Time to do something. Time to do anything. And I do it a lot when I'm meditating. When I started meditating, I only did guided meditations. And then I would meditate and I would have a list of questions to ask. And I've really been practicing meditating where I have no set intention at all. And I just let whatever comes through come through. And even if it's just a feeling of calmness, then that's enough.
I was the same when I started meditating too. It had to be guided meditations because I could not sit still. And in all honesty, sometimes I still can't. There are days where I have too much on my mind and I have a list in my head because I'm a list person, Virgo South Node, can't help it. I have to make lists. Lists make me feel good sometimes. So sometimes when I try to meditate, I find that I'm the same as you. I 4 minutes. I think it's been so long, and I'm so proud of myself. And I look at the clock. Oh, it's only been 3 minutes. Oh, okay. Here, let's try this again.
That happened so much for me when I was really like completely first started like taking a yoga class here and there and meditating. One of my good friends, she used to make me meditate with her, and we would go to the beach. And I remember she would set a timer for 5 minutes. And those 5 minutes felt like forever. But I also had my little ego in the back of my mind telling me that I was doing it wrong. Like, no, you're thinking about me right now. Like you're not meditating. So it kind of even I even had resistance to meditating because my ego would come in and tell me that I was doing it wrong and that I had too many thoughts and I shouldn't be thinking about what I was going to eat for lunch instead of honoring that thought that comes in and then allowing it to be processed and then to move on. It's really interesting.
I, it is so interesting. I love how there really is so much talk about resistance. I wasn't sure how long this episode was going to be, but I suppose resistance is just such a part of everyday life now, especially after 2020, that it seems almost impossible to not talk about resistance in some way, shape, or form. Even the other day, I was taking a day bath, because I love day baths on the full moon. And as I was lying there, I actually noticed that I couldn't even fully relax. Have you ever noticed when you're in a bathtub, you actually still push your feet against the tub to keep yourself up, which doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just falling, not falling, but relaxing into the water, it's almost like my body is still holding onto something. It can't let go. So every time I noticed myself doing that, I'd take a deep breath and I'd relax and my body would start to sink and I'd feel comfortable. But I noticed even after 5 minutes, it was a natural state for my body to try to resist the bathtub. It didn't even make any sense because I love the bath. I love being in there. But it's just my body, it's like that fight or flight response that we've been conditioned into. It's just always aware. It's just always holding on to something, like, just in case, I have to make sure that we're on alert. And, and especially because the bath there is pretty much my sanctuary. Water is my sanctuary. And it was surprising that I couldn't just let go. I mean, when I'm in the ocean, totally different story. I just kind of, let go. You kind of, because the
Mhm.
ocean forces you to fall over. It forces you to flow and to move. So when you're in a bathtub, you're you don't really have that sort of push to, hey, you're just
Yeah.
gonna float today,
You
you
don't
know?
have nature helping you along. Be like, "We're
No,
gonna relax, okay? We're gonna chill."
no, you have this worldly physical tub telling you to stay in one place and you can't move.
That makes sense.
Right? It's so strange. It's so funny how that shows up.
You explaining that kind of reminded me of how I was feeling yesterday, which was a really challenging day for me. And I felt like all day long I was just clenching and holding on to try and control. I have no idea what I was trying to control, but I was like doing a really good job at it. And I told my cousin about it, and she gave me this really good exercise that I wanted to share. It was amazing. She said, drop your jaw, close your eyes, think of a color. Picture that color behind your eyelids, and picture that color flowing over your body, starting from the top of your head to the tip of your toes. Every breath in is a light, and every breath you exhale is a negative energy, or however you want to imagine it to be. And I was totally resistant to it. I was like, oh, cool, that's good advice. I'll try that next time. As I was in the moment experiencing this like hardcore resistance and clenching and need to control. And then I just closed my eyes. This took me maybe 30 seconds to do. And I felt so much better after it. And everything started to just kind of line up and fall into place for the rest of my day. It was awesome.
I actually really love that. And I love that's so powerful because I think we ignore the power of visualization a lot in our society when really everything begins in our thoughts. Everything that was ever created in our entire world was first created in someone else's thoughts because someone saw it in their mind. They visualized it like a chair. A chair wouldn't have came into existence unless someone thought of that chair in their head, pictured it, and then created it. So with that power of visualization, we really have the ability to shift the course that we're on and the path that we're on, including what we're feeling. And I'm not saying to bypass what you're feeling because there's a reason, it's getting to the root of that. Like I said, for me, that resistance comes down to not feeling in like I'm feeling powerless and I'm feeling that lack of control. That's where really it comes from when I begin to ask myself those questions. So, and especially with color, because color is what our eyes translate as a vibration. So using that to cover ourselves and visualizing that we're literally shifting our vibration with that meditation. So it's it's pretty amazing. What a great meditation. Thank you to Brianna's cousin for that.
Yeah, shout out to Steph. Another Steph,
Another step.
of course. So
Not
good.
me.
Yeah. I also wanted to touch on visualization or visualizing, um, because I just recently became visual. So I never could visualize anything. People would tell me to visualize things, and I would be like, but it's dark. Like I don't see anything. And so for me, a lot of times it comes in as a knowing. So if I'm connecting and if I'm trying to wash my body over in yesterday, the color that came up was purple. I was visualizing myself kind of being bathed in this color purple. But for me, I didn't see it. I knew that it was happening. So I kind of stated within that I had a purple light rain fall or waterfall washing over my body. And so stating that and setting that intention is the same thing as visualizing, even though it's not actually visual. I didn't see purple. And another thing that I think is really good to note too, it would have been really helpful for me, is that it's your imagination. Your imagination and your intuition are the same exact thing. So your if you imagine a chair, you're visualizing a chair, like you're intuitively seeing it.
Yeah, I completely agree about visualization and imagination, especially as an artist myself. And I'm the opposite. I'm highly tuned visually, and I've always been like that. So for me, even with my spiritual gifts, a lot is revealed to me in my dreams because they're very visual. Even on the physical plane here, the things that I see in the sky, the symbols that I see, which we will get into in another at another date and time. I also I love that you shared the example of not being very visual because I've also heard that from a lot of people. And it's not because we all have such different gifts and we're not all meant to be the same. We're all unique fragments of source. So I think if you also have had a hard time using visualization and you want to do the exercise that Brianna just shared, and you connect more with feeling rather than seeing, maybe you can even try it in the shower. So as the water falls down on you, feel that color wash over you. So maybe that's another way that you can still experience this meditation, even if you're not particularly visual.
I love that. So we just came up with three different ways to do one meditation. That's so powerful. And
It's
hopefully
also
that
so
can,
like us.
yeah, I know that's true. We should have been manifesting generators.
Honestly, but me and Brianna are projectors. So, but actually, no, it kind of makes sense. We're good at giving that perspective and looking at different ways that can help other people based on
That's
their
true. And my profile is a 1-3, which is all about
Me
sharing your
too.
experience. Oh, you're a 1-3?
Yes,
Obviously. But
obviously.
it's all about sharing your experience to help others.
I love that.
Hi, friends. If you want to help us keep the conversation going, please join us in our When in Bloom family Facebook group. We'll make sure to leave a link in the show notes below.
Continuing with our tips, tricks, and alignment tools, what other tools have you personally used, Brianna, to help you move through resistance?
Well, one of my favorite tricks moving through resistance is using mantras. They really help me with the surrendering process. And one of the mantras that I've been using recently is I create all things with ease. And it just really helps me remember that it is okay to release control of every little thing that is going on. And it helps me remember that if something doesn't come easily to me, that it's not really in alignment for myself. And my favorite way to get mantras is just to ground my energy. So I take some deep breaths into my body and I ground with the earth and just relax and really release any tension that I'm holding on to. Release any resistance that I'm holding on to. And I just simply ask or state within to receive a mantra. So, whatever mantra I get, I kind of really stick with it until I'm done with it. So, right now, this mantra of I create all things with ease seems so simple, but when you're actually doing it, it's really scary and it's really hard because I'm just in a situation where I really don't have control over what's going on. Like, I don't have control over the timeline, which is really terrifying for me. And using this mantra helps me kind of surrender into the flow that the universe is creating for me. And another thing I do along with using this mantra is that I ask for symbols for reassurance. My symbol to kind of show me that I'm on the right path right now is an eagle. And I saw two eagles when we were talking about and deciding to do this podcast. And then a week after we started recording, I saw another eagle. And then I had like this big realization moment and I saw two more eagles, like in their physical form. And I never, ever have seen eagles before this, like ever. And now they are everywhere. Kind of like they're for helping me reassure myself that I am creating everything with ease and that it doesn't have to look like how I've been taught that it's supposed to look like, or it doesn't have to look like how it is looking for other people.
That's great, especially because eagles and hawks are a common spirit guide for both of us.
Yeah. Another thing that I do to help me find where I'm holding on to resistance is I look where I am creating excuses for things. So if I think, oh, I can't do this because of that, normally I'm holding resistance to that because really we don't need excuses for anything. If you don't want to do something, just your reason for not doing it is that you don't want to do it. You don't have to make up an excuse. Oh, I could never do that because it doesn't bring me enough money. But really, you can do whatever you want.
Those are great tools. I love both of those. It's actually very similar to a mantra that I received recently, only about a few days ago. So it's pretty recent regarding resistance. And the mantra I received was during meditation from my guides, and it kind of dropped in, and it was, I no longer resist because I am resilient. So I got to thinking of the word resilient and what that actually means. And basically, resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So, going back to what you said earlier in the episode, Brianna, how your ego tries to keep you safe, resistance challenges you to grow. So, I kept thinking of when I received this mantra, I kept thinking of the flower and how, for example, because I recently did a few courses in herbalism, and one of the herbs we learn of pretty significantly is the dandelion. And in Canada and North America, it's considered the common weed. But what's remarkable about this herb, this flower, is that it is resilient. It grows through all four seasons, no matter what people try to do to get rid of this flower. I'm going to call it a flower. I'm not going to call it a weed because there's so many medicinal properties, which will be obviously for another episode. This flower continues to come back no matter what is thrown at her. She continues to grow year after year after the snow, after the rain. She just keeps coming back. And that was my, just an example for me when I was meditating, that I was given that to be like the dandelion, just resilient, just strong, because it is in your challenges are what help you grow. You grow because of your challenges. So I love that you said that, Brianna. That mantra definitely resonated with me. And it actually it mirrors the mantra that I received myself.
I love that too because here you always see dandelions under the snow. So it's so cool. And if you also, they're so nourishing. They're the first food for bees.
Yeah, I love that. So just being like the flower, being like the dandelion, and just being resilient through your challenges. And because it's your challenges, once again, that help you to grow. So I also received, I think this ties in a little bit too, Brianna, with what you were saying earlier about making excuses and not being able to control, because once again, that's what we spoke of earlier in the episode. It's about that lack of control where resistance begins to show up. And I received a visualization back in August 2020 because as I mentioned, I'm highly attuned visually. So I receive a lot of my messages very visually, and then I turn them into paintings. So this one, I received a visualization, and I guess you could call it another mantra. It was, if it doesn't flow, let it go. So basically, I was in a beautiful forest standing on the edge of a stream, and this water was filled with stars, and it represented the flow of consciousness. So basically, what no longer serves you, aligns with you, or brings you joy, like people, places, projects, jobs, even a diet, certain ambitions or ideas, can be released into this water. And then you can watch it flow out of sight, carry it to the next person that needs it for their own expansion. Nothing is ever truly lost. So sometimes we hold on to something that we need to let go of. And then when you release it down the stream for the next person, you create space for other things to flow your way. If it doesn't flow with who you are and with the person you are becoming, you can just let it go. So I find myself doing this a lot where I'm standing at the edge of this stream and I'm holding, sometimes if it's a situation with someone else that I'm resisting and I feel I have no control over, I'll visualize it almost as if it's on a TV box in my hands. One of those old TV boxes from the from the 1990s. You know what I'm talking about, Brianna.
Oh, yeah.
And I will just drop it into the stream and watch it float away. And it's really, basically, it's that visualization of physically releasing what doesn't serve me anymore.
That is amazing. So I actually got a similar message like a week ago, actually exactly a week ago. However, I got this message as the person picking things up like further on down the stream,
That's
obviously.
incredible.
And I wrote it down and I never write anything down, so it's pretty amazing. I wonder how I got it, but so this is what I got. This was me just connecting with my guides, and they said, "You hold the knowledge and the experiences of the world inside of you. Do not take this on as your own. Use it to better understand the experiences from a bigger perspective through the mind of a human." So, like coinciding with what you were saying, it's the stream of consciousness. That's what we're all connected to. I can take on the experiences of someone else to learn that experience and embody it without actually having to go through it. Because at the end of the day, we're all one. Like we all take our knowledge and bring it back to source. But if we ourselves are source, we are also that knowledge. But we don't have to take it on if we don't want to.
Yes, yes, and yes. I'm thinking of that emoji where you just throw the hands up. that's
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing right now. And I love how it came full circle from me to you at totally different times.
Yeah, like what, 6, 7 months later.
I
Hmm.
know. And oh, that's amazing. Did you have one more, Brianna, that you wanted to speak about?
Yeah. The other thing that I really like to do, just to listen and to take action on each message that you receive every day. It really helps you lean into the surrender and the trust that just helps. It almost, it's funny because now it's like channeling through me as like a river. Like you just like get carried down the river and the stream, and it's just easy. Like you don't have any work to do. You just, the only work you had to do is to show up at the river, and it brings you to where you need to be.
That cosmic surrender,
Yeah.
which is also another painting of mine.
Oh my God, I love
Everything always comes back to art. So many messages coming through. Always. It's the best.
it. It is the best.
Each week, we finish the episode with an oracle card to provide some guidance on the week ahead or by sharing an affirmation that you can bring with you into the week to support you on your journey. Today, I decided to originally only pull one card. However, when the first card fell out, I felt called to pull another. So, the first card that fell out of the deck as I was shuffling was the Nine of Swords. And when I was shuffling the deck, I was asking the question, what does resistance look like? And the card that came out showed a woman in a very dark forest with about 9 swords over her head, pointing down towards her head, and she was holding a full moon in her left hand. So basically, the full moon is a symbol for obscurities and illusions, which ultimately feed our anxiety and our anguish most of the time. And with the 9 swords above her head, it's supposed to indicate the patterns of psychological suffering that emerge through our mental shadows. And as I spoke of earlier in the episode, that's for me personally, that's where the resistance begins is on the mental plane, and then it manifests on the physical plane in my physical body. So, the question with this type of card, you can ask yourself, where and how do I focus my energy? And how are you going to reroute these negative forces in your mind? Because as I mentioned earlier, the battle pretty much is within, it starts within the mind. And once we conquer that, we can pretty much conquer anything. That's the one thing that we can control is our thoughts. And I also want to mention too, with the full moon being represented in this card, it's actually quite ironic that as we are recording this, a full moon will be coming up as well. And as you are listening to this, so it's definitely something to keep in mind as you go into the week ahead, the next upcoming weeks. And that just remind yourself that it's okay to feel that darkness sometimes because the moon goes through her phases, and ultimately so do we. So the second card that I decided to pull after shuffling again was the Magician. And the question that I asked as I was shuffling before I pulled this card was, how do I move through resistance? And on this card, there's a man who represents the magician, and there's a nice sort of mountain spacey background, and he's wearing a long white flowing robe. And at his feet are the tools of the alchemist. You've got the sword, the coin, the chalice, and the wand, which also represents the four suits in this tarot deck. And basically, the magician acts as a conduit between the cosmos. So, as above, which is the cosmos, and the earthly planes, so below. And with these alchemical tools laying at his feet, it's showing that he's the elemental vessel of transfiguration, which means that you are the one that can transform your thoughts, as we were asking about resistance and how to move through it. So, the questions you can ask yourself are, how can I create and manifest from within? And how can I harness my power? Because once again, that resistance, that lack of control, as I mentioned earlier, comes back to feeling powerless. So, how can you harness your power going forward into the week ahead? And some gemstones, because this is a card from the major arcana, some gemstones that could be useful this week as you're trying to work through and ask yourself these questions are moldavite and emerald. And basically, with the magician, he pretty much represents the tools of alchemy. So you can transmute your situation. And as we're going back to the previous card, how resistance manifests itself through the Nine of Swords, the magician comes to help you move through it because he's trying to teach you that you can transmute that energy. You can transmute your thoughts by changing them. So basically, you have all those powerful skills and the talents that rest within you waiting to be alchemized. So you learn to work with your natural gifts, like the physical, which is the earth element, the mental, which is the air element, the spiritual, which is the fire element, and the emotional, which is the water element. So it's learning to take all these tools within you because, as we have stated so many times, especially in our first episode, we are made of the earth. We're not only stardust, but we are made of the physical earth, and we have all these elements within us. So it's learning how to use these elements and continuously channel your full potential. So it's understanding that as the magician, you are powerful. You have the power to create, you have the power to destroy, you have the power to transmute, and you have the power to alchemize whatever situation that you are in. So I hope that helps you in the going forward through the week ahead. Brianna, do you have any comments or questions on that?
Wow, that was really beautiful. That resonated so strongly with me, even for what I'm moving through right now. So it was really great. Thank you for sharing that. And that brings us to the end of our episode today. Thank you so much for joining in on our conversation all about resistance today. I know this is something that we have been experiencing a lot lately, and also a lot of my friends and even family around me. We'd love to know some of your favorite ways that you move through resistance and if any of our tips helped you. So be sure to leave us a comment on our Instagram. You can find us at when.inbloom. See you all next week.